And welcome to another edition of Unlettered and Ordinary Apologetics. Last video I made. Ooh, all you orthododos out there. Yeah. You guys didn't like it that a JW came in and just completely wrecked Mr. Dyer, did you? Couldn't accept it. Couldn't accept the defeat. No. You had to pretend like Jay dominated this guy, even though they was double teamed. And then some of you made comments that it was misleading because I put my picture on the thumbnail and I wasn't the one debating him. Obviously, I made that very clear, guys. I made that very clear that I was not the JW that was debating Jay Dyer. I was a JW for 30 plus years, but no longer. Yeah. Don't know why that bothered some of you so much. People critique other people's videos all the time and they didn't participate in them. So get over yourselves. So with that, I figured, hey, you know what? Let's call into the Jay Dyer Show and see what this guy has to say. How does he deal with Colossians chapter 1? And verse 15. Well, he flip-flops is what he does. Goes back and forth between a partitive genitive and genitive of subordination. He doesn't even know what those terms mean. Because when I ask him about it, he just dodges the question. And then when I acquiesce and go to Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 4, he just ends the conversation. He wanted to run away to Hebrews chapter 1 because he thinks verse 10 and probably verse 2 as well support his position that Jesus is the creator. No, Jay, I am sorry, but the term katizo, to create, is never actively applied to the Son. Not even in Hebrews chapter 1, bud. So I don't know where you're getting this information, but Jesus is not the creator. He is not the source of creation. All things came out of the Father, right? But through the Son. And what you don't also seem to understand is that integral and inherent to the word all in Greek is the word other. It just depends on whether or not contextually there is a logical case for an exception. If there's exceptions to the word all, then obviously it's not every conceivable thing. Hardly ever does the word all mean every conceivable thing when it's used in the scriptures. Maybe John chapter 1 verse 3, because that's talking about all physical creation, if you interpret the beginning in John chapter 1 to be identical to the beginning of Genesis chapter 1, which is just strictly the creation of the physical heavens and the physical earth. It says nothing about angels. It says nothing about heaven itself, which if you think about it, if that's God's eternal dwelling place in heaven itself, the heavens of the heavens has to be eternal as well. Otherwise, where is God existing? Wherever he exists, that's where heaven is, right? And if he's eternal, then that would mean that his dwelling place was also eternal. So anyways, I don't want to make this too long. I probably will anyways, but let's just get into it. He has a little bit of trouble, or I had a little bit of trouble connecting, so bear with me.
What's up?
Hey, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Hey, Jay. So I was a JW for 30 years. Scamdemic kind of woke me up, the way they handled that. But, with every good con, there's truth thrown in there. So I was just wondering, when it comes to the identity of God and Jesus, what do you think about Colossians 1:15? You don't believe that that's identifying Jesus as the firstborn of all creation?
That's just talking about his status as resurrected. It's not talking about his eternal status like John 1 does. And all the Old Testament passages identify the Son as Yahweh.
Did you notice that? His eternal status found in John 1:1. There's nothing eternal about the Word. Just because the Word was in the beginning with God, with Ton Theon, with the God, which means that he can't be that God, right? So stupid. The beginning is just the beginning of the physical heavens and the physical earth. The angels were also present at that time. Read Job 38. Did they not cry out and applaud joyfully when God brought these things into existence? Oh, they did. They did. Okay, so then what are you talking about, bro? John 1:1 does not establish that Jesus was eternal, not by a long shot.
But wouldn't the expression being the firstborn of the dead be an expression that relates to his resurrection?
Yes. That's what communicates that he is the firstborn of the dead. That's what means that he's the first one to be resurrected. It has nothing to do with Colossians 1:15. That's a completely different thing. First of all, Colossians 1:15 starts out, he's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. What's an image, Jay? Yeah, you with the sunglasses, trying to be all Miami Vice and stuff. What's an image, buddy? Do you know what it is? An image of something? Is an image of something actually that something? Or are they two completely different things? Like, this is your image on screen and this is my image on screen. Are we identical to our images? No. I can take a picture of myself. If I burn the picture, if I shoot my picture with a gun straight in the head, am I going to die? No, because that picture is not me. It's an image of me. Right? And no, being called the firstborn of all creation has nothing to do with his resurrection. Being called firstborn from the dead does have to do with his resurrection. So idiotic.
Of those phrases, because he's the firstborn of the new creation. So
you see how he tried to smuggle, and he's the firstborn of the new creation. Now watch what happens when I call him out on that. Trying to smuggle that word "new." It's not in the text, Jay.
And then he's called that in other passages as well. So
where new?
Huh?
In the Greek.
I'm not saying in.
Right. So you couldn't hear me because I was breaking it, but I said, where does the word "new" in the Greek? He's not saying. Now you're not saying what? That he's not that he's. Now you're not saying that he's the new creation there in Colossians 1:15. Okay, what are you saying?
Colossians, he's called the new. Colossians 1 what?
He's called the new what? Where is he called the new creation? Nowhere. He's just called the creation of the firstborn of all creation. He's called the beginning of creation by God. In Proverbs, he's called, created, the one that God acquired as the beginning of his ways. Yeah. His origins were from, time indefinite, right? From ancient times. But an origin denotes a beginning, buddy. So what are you even talking about? This is just pathetic.
1:15. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation.
Right. By being
by
being the firstborn son and being resurrected, he is over all creation. That's why Hebrews 1 calls him.
By being the firstborn son and the firstborn of the dead, he's over all creation. Yeah, but what does it mean to be a firstborn son, Jay? What does that naturally imply? Dude, yeah, it implies that you had a beginning to your existence, that your father was the one that brought you into existence, who created you. That's why he's the firstborn of all creation.
The creator of the angels and not therefore a creature.
Well, you said
He's never, Katizo, Jay, just so you know, buddy, Katizo is never actively applied to the Son. Did you know that? No, never. It's always in the passive form. It's never in the active, and it's never in the middle voice, which would be even more explicit, right? But never. You can never find that. You don't find it. You don't find it in John, chapter 1, verse 3. You don't find it in Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. And you don't find it in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2 or verse 10. Hebrews 1, dude, is not where Trinitarians want to go. Just like John 1:1 is not where Trinitarians want to go. Because then you get into the whole fact that two separate individuals are referred to as theos. And since theos is a count noun, Jay, you have to count each time individually as an individual God, right? It's a predicate nominative. Theos is a predicate nominative, which means that it's always a form of a noun. It's not an adjective. It's not saying that Jesus is divine. It's distinguishing Jesus and the Father in terms of theos. One is ton theon, the God, and the other is theos, anarthros theos, a God. It's either definite or indefinite, right? None of this qualitative nonsense. It's not an adjective. Predicate nominatives are not adjectives. They're always a form of a noun. So which is it? Is he a God or the God? If he's the God, then he's the God that he's with, and he's identified as the Father. That's modalism, dude.
quoted it as firstborn over, so you think that's a genitive of subordination instead of a partitive genitive?
I'm interpreting it in light of all the other passages and not your Jehovah's Witness interpretation of the passage.
That's a non-answer, numbnuts. That doesn't answer my question. Is it a partitive genitive? Is Jesus actually a part of creation? You first said that he's part of the new creation, and then you used a genitive of subordination and then says that he's over creation. So which is it? It can't be both simultaneously. It's communicating one thing or the other. So please answer that question, Jay. Come on. You can do it.
Because in Hebrews 1, he is called the creator of all the beings.
No. Oh, no, he's not called the creator. It says that creation was done through him. That's agency, Jay. Instrumentality, Jay. The word used in Greek is in, or by means of, or through. Okay? He is not the active creator. He's the one through whom the Creator created all things apart from himself. Yes, the word pas, or all, in Greek, carries with it the inherent thought of all other. You can add that word other if in context there is a clear exception. And Colossians 1:15 clearly calls Jesus the firstborn of all creation, placing him squarely in the realm of the created order. Yes, that's what that expression means. You have nothing, you have no grammatical basis for anything that you just said, especially concerning Colossians 1:15, which we weren't done with, by the way. But this guy wants to run from it so fast because he doesn't know what a genitive of subordination is, and he doesn't know what a partitive genitive is. But let me educate you a little bit, Jay. Come on, man. Let me educate you. All right? Whenever you have the word prototokos, connected to a group that's in the genitive case, okay? Not nominative, not accusative, not dative, not vocative. Whenever it's in the genitive case, okay? Whenever you have that, the firstborn is A, always literally the one born first, produced first. And B is always a member of the group signified by its genitive case. Okay? Right, so firstborn of Pharaoh is the first child born to Pharaoh's family, Pharaoh's house. Okay, firstborn of the herd is member of the herd. Firstborn of cattle is cow or bull, whatever. Firstborn of sheep is a sheep, right? Every single time. So we have 30 plus occurrences of this. So the most natural way to interpret that is that the firstborn is part of the group. And what group is Jesus being said to be a part of? The firstborn of? Yeah, creation. Not new creation. There's nothing in the text that demands that to be the case. So if you just take the text for what it says, he's the firstborn of all creation. He's part of creation. Which part? The one that was born first. That's why he's also called the beginning of creation by God, and that wisdom in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 22 was created as the beginning of God's ways. And in Micah 5:2, he had an origin from ancient times. Game over, dude. You lose.
Be the creator if he's a creature.
He's not the creator. That's where you're wrong.
Well, first we have to establish if he was created. If he was
in
created,
Hebrews 1, is he?
Right. First of all, we got to deal with what the argument that I put on the table that you ran away from and you ignored my question. You didn't answer my question, numbnuts. What a coward. And this guy's complaining because so many people were calling in that were just like kissing his ass. You know, these sycophants just call in and just try to puff up this dude's ego constantly. And here I call in wanting to have an actual conversation and give him some pushback. And this guy just shuts the conversation right down. So, but I acquiesced, right? As you'll see, I acquiesce and I go to Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 4, right? Which talks about how Jesus became better. You'll notice when he quotes it, it says he leaves out the word became and simply just says that Jesus was better than the angels because he's the creator. No, Jay, that's not what the text says. And we'll go and we'll read Hebrews chapter 1 because I love Hebrews chapter 1 and Hebrews chapter 2. They both destroy the Trinity brilliantly.
Called the creator of the worlds and the creator of the angels, and thus is he superior to the angels because he created them.
You see? He's superior to the angels because he created them. He leaves out the very key word that qualifies all that when he says that he became better than the angels. So are you going to argue, Jay, that Jesus became better than the angels because he's always been the creator and God? That's the stupidest argument I think I've ever heard. God. And you guys listen, you ortho dodos out there, you think this guy's a genius, don't you? You think this guy is just like top-notch apologist. Oh, he knows the Bible. Blah, blah. He's worse than Sam Shamoon, and that guy's a clown.
Well, the whole point that Paul was making was he was trying to establish how Jesus became better.
In
than the
Hebrews
angels.
1, is he called the creator of the... All right, so you're not going to answer. You're just going to...
No, he
Is... no.
He,
Let's get out of here, stupid heretic.
Get out of here, stupid. Oh, you can't answer that question either. Every question I pose to you, you just can't answer. You just dodge and deflect, try to run away to Hebrews chapter 1, which destroys Trinitarianism. So let's look at how badly it does. Oh my God, Jay, you're pathetic, dude. Hebrews chapter 1, in the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. Verse 2, but in these last days, he, God, spoke to us by his Son. Wow. So the word by and through, you can see here in New Living Translation, it says through. It's the Greek word en, and it denotes instrumentality. So let me ask you, in verse 1 here, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets. Is anyone on earth ever going to confuse the prophets with God because God spoke through them? Are they going to view them as the same individual? No. But all of a sudden you use that same preposition, by or through, that God's speaking through his Son, then all of a sudden that means that the Son is God? No. And again, he's appointed. And what does the word Son mean? Yeah, it means somebody that is begotten, and he is the firstborn. It even says it here in Hebrews chapter 1. It refers to Jesus as the firstborn, right? That he brought into the world. So before he was brought into the world, he was known as the firstborn. The firstborn of what, Jay? Oh, yeah, the firstborn of all creation, right? So he whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom, again, through whom also he made the universe, or created the world, or he made the ages. And who made the ages? Yeah, that's God. But he made it through his Son. It doesn't preclude Jesus from being a created being. No, doesn't. Not at all. And I'll show you why. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. The Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of what? His person? No, his being. Yeah, and what's the Greek word there for being? It's hypostasis, right? Oh, yeah. Hypostasis, which you guys think means person, but it doesn't. It means nature. His being. He's a copy, right? He's the character, the exact representation, the imprint, engraving, a figure stamped, right? What did Dr. White compare it to in his debate with Greg Stafford? Do you remember, Jay? Did you watch that debate? Yeah, you just forgot about it, I'm sure, right? Yeah, Dr. White compared it to a signet ring that you press into wax, and it leaves the image. The exact image that's on the ring is now in the wax. Oh, okay, all right. So, is the image in the wax? Is it coextensive with the ring? Meaning, does it share the same amount of existence, time of existence? Or is there a temporal distinction between the image that the ring made in the wax seal and the image on the ring? And are the two separate and distinct entities? I mean, they're made of different stuff even, right? It's like you guys have to pervert all this language in order to try to force and basically rape the Bible, right? You're raping the Bible. You're forcing yourself into the text, forcing your theology into the text, regardless of what the natural meaning of the words are. You guys are perverts. You're just abusing the text over and over and over and over again. You don't know what a son is. A son is not the same being as his father. He's produced by his father. He owes his life to the father. They're not the same age. They don't have the same, will. They don't share the same essence. Sure, they're both human. And yeah, Jesus is a God, just like Jehovah or Yahweh or Yahweh is a God. He's a spirit. All that means, God is just a spirit being, right? It can mean ruler and all different things, but when you're talking about ontology, it just means spirit. Jesus is a spirit. God is a spirit. The angels are also made spirits, which is pointed out here in Hebrews as well. But let's let's keep reading in Hebrews, the chapter you ran to, thinking that it was going to save you. Okay. And he's sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, how did he provide purification for sins exactly? How? Yeah, he died, right? Mm-hmm. And what's one of the things we know scripturally that God can't do, apart from lying? Yeah, he can't die either. Oh, well, that was just his human nature that died. Oh, okay. Really? So human nature now, we're going to reify human nature and give it concreteness and say that human nature can now die, even though it's just an abstract concept that defines basically what we can do as human beings. Yeah, human nature is not, you can't do anything to human nature. Human nature doesn't do anything. People do things, right? Like, have you seen human nature drive a car? Or can we go visit human nature and have tea or coffee with human nature? No, we can't. We can go and visit people. People can drive cars. We can have conversations with people, but not with nature. So no, Jesus' human nature didn't die. All you're left with was him just shedding a body. And then you guys have the audacity to sit there and tell us that it was necessary for God, for Jesus to be God so that he could pay the sacrifice for our sins. Well, his divine nature supposedly never died. His human nature didn't die because that's ridiculous. We just established that human nature can't die. Just his body. He just shed a body. It's like, that's not anything. It's so stupid. And then notice, after that, after his death and resurrection, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven, or the majestic God in heaven, as the New Living Translation says. Who's the majestic God in heaven? Is it the Trinity? Did Jesus sit next to the Trinity? No. Again, God is just identified as the Father. Yeah. Yeah, just like 1 Corinthians 8:6 tells us, right? That for Christians, there's one God, Jay. It's the Father. Yeah. And Jesus is the one Lord. Okay? But Lord and God are not equivalents of one another, buddy. Yeah, Lord is not just the equivalent to the divine name. No. Because Jesus was made Lord by God. Yeah, did you forget that verse? Jesus was made Lord by his God and Father. Oh my Lord, this is so bad. And now Hebrews chapter 1 verse 4 is what I quoted. And this is what caused him to hang up. Because he knows that he doesn't have an answer to this question. So he became as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. Having become as much superior to angels, so he became as far superior to angels. Oh, that's the key word that you left out. You just said that he's superior to the angels. And you notice it's not even ontology, because he's still just a spirit. But his name, it's the name he has inherited, which means he didn't always possess it. He never... Oh, man. He got a superior name to theirs because of what he endured, from the obedience that he learned, and through the sufferings that he had to go through as a man. You guys robbed the Bible of this beautiful message of God's first created thing that loved humanity so much that he gave up his existence as a God, that glorified position that he had before the world was, that glory that he had. He gave that up. to be abused and to suffer so that we might have a chance of eternal life. I mean, making Jesus out to be God in the flesh just takes any of the meaning of that and just makes it, meaningless, I guess. Because God proved faithful to himself. God learned obedience to himself. No. Philippians chapter 2 specifically says that Jesus had to empty himself of that form, that morphe theou, right? The form of God, so that he could take on the form of a servant, of a male slave, of a human male. Now, so that by itself destroys the hypostatic union, because the word for empty, kanao, literally means to abase, right? To falsify, to make unreal. You guys don't believe that Jesus made his divine nature unreal, or that he falsified it, or that he abased it entirely, to empty himself completely of it. That's what that word means. There's like 4 or 5 uses of that word in the New Testament. They all basically mean to completely empty, like till there's nothing left. All you guys say is that he somehow diminished his divinity, but he was still 100% God. That's not what that word means, and that's absurd. How does God diminish himself from being God and yet retain 100% of his divine nature? You guys are trying to have it both ways. It's so pathetic, man. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 5. For to which of the angels did God ever say, "You are my son, today I have become your father"? Or again, "I will be his father, and he will be my son"? Again, what is a father and a son? What's the dynamic between a father and the son? Naturally speaking, right? What kind of images or thoughts does it convey when you think of a father and a son, Jay? Do you think of the same human being? No. No, you think of 2 separate individuals, right? 2 separate beings, right? Yeah, they're both human, right? So they share the same nature of being human, but they're 2 separate humans, just like Jesus and God are 2 separate gods, right? Jesus is a heteros theos, another God, and as Philo said, he's deuteros theos, a second God. That's right. Yeah, because God begets God, spirit begets spirit, flesh begets flesh. And of course, this was said to him while he was a man, so that's why it's not to any angel that God said these things. It's after he had emptied himself of the morphe theou. And again, when God brings his firstborn into the world, when did Jesus come into the world? Yeah, when he was born as a human, right? But even then, before that, he was known as God's firstborn. Yeah. Because he existed in the morphe theou, right, as a God, as a separate and distinct, a second, another God, the firstborn of all creation, the beginning of creation by God. Yeah, let all the angels worship him. Nothing wrong with that. If God commands it, that's appropriate. Because it gets back to the other video, the last video I did, where I critiqued your conversation with that JW, and we looked at 1 Chronicles 29:20, where the entire nation of Israel They bowed low and they worshiped Jehovah and the King. No distinction in the word worship there, is there? In what they did or what they said, it's all the same. So now, in speaking of the angels, he says he makes his angels spirits and his servants flames of fire. So he makes his angels. Is there any room for an uncreated angel? No. He makes or he creates his angels as spirits. Flames of fire. That's why when the angel of Jah showed up in the burning bush, it wasn't burning, but it looked like it was on fire. Yeah, because that was a flame of fire. That was a spirit in that bush. It wasn't God. Then we get to Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 8, which is just a quotation from Psalms 45. But about the Son, he, meaning the psalmist, because if you read, actually, Psalm 45, it's not Jehovah speaking. It's a human being writing to the king about his wedding. And he refers to Solomon, most likely, as potentially as God. But again, this is a verse that could be translated as God is your throne, where God is the subject and not the direct object. So there's some controversy as to how that's translated. But even if I grant you that it's speaking of the human king initially as God, it would be God in a predicate sense, right? God by predication, not by identity. Or no one's going to argue that the human king was actually God, right? Okay. But then notice what it says. Your throne, O God, will last forever and ever. The scepter of justice will be the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, okay, so this God, by predication, has a God. Therefore, God, your God. Now, if you want to claim that this is actually calling Jesus the God by identity, then this God has a God, according to verse 9. You sure you want to do that? And notice, and this God has set this other God up above your companions by anointing you with the oil of joy. Who are God's companions that this other God has to set this God above? You guys are stupid. You guys are so dumb. You want to run to Hebrews chapter 1? Oh, God. He also says, in the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. Now, this is probably one of the other verses you were alluding to. But it goes on and says that they will perish, but you will remain. They will wear out like a garment. You will roll them up like a robe, like a garment. They will be changed, but you remain the same, and your years will never end. So even if I grant you here that the Lord, which again, there is some textual variance between the Masoretic text, right, and the Septuagint here. One has the word Lord and the other doesn't. But the word Jehovah, the Tetragrammaton, is not in this quotation. So this potentially could be just an actual, prophecy concerning, the Lord of Psalms, because Jehovah said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, right? So this could be that Lord. Or even if I grant you that this is applicable to Jehovah, I would argue that it doesn't make any sense that this would be something that the author of Hebrews is using as proof of how Jesus became better than the angels because he's always been God. So he became better than the angels by the fact that he's always been God. Yeah. No. Really, the whole point of this text is to show that, like a garment, he will continue to remain just like God, and your years will never end. So what he's pointing to is that now, after Jesus has been resurrected from the dead as the firstborn out of the dead, he has been granted immortality, right? That's made clear in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, about how the dead will be raised and what kind of body will they come. As he says, the last Adam became a living soul. Well, the first Adam became a living soul, right? That's the Adam in the Garden of Eden. But the last Adam became a life-giving spirit. Again, there's that key word became that you can't deal with, right? You can't cope with that word became, because it essentially means that he was created. He was recreated as a spirit. Yeah, and he was given that morphe theou. He became an exact representation of God's being, because now he's immortal, just like God. Who else could have Jesus being given immortality been likened to other than God himself? It had to be a text that applied to Jehovah initially, because Jehovah was the only one that was immortal at that point in time. But that's the kicker, right? Because this text is only applied to him after he's resurrected. He only gains immortality. He only becomes a life-giving spirit, or an immortal spirit, at his resurrection. Which means he wasn't always an immortal spirit. A, he wasn't always immortal, right? And B, he wasn't always a spirit. He was a man before that. He died as a man. Yeah. You guys have absolutely nothing. And to which of the angels did God ever say, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet"? Again, Jesus, there's God. And then there's Jesus at his right hand. So it should be this way for me. Right? God and Jesus sitting at his right hand. Now, how many individuals, persons, beings does that make? If you just naturally read it without your trifocals on, you got to let this stuff go. Seriously, this is so bad. Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Yeah. We must pay. Oh, okay. Now it's getting on to chapter 2. Well, look, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can get into the fact that Jesus was made a little lower than the angels, right? It is not to angels that he subjected the world to come, about which we are speaking, but there's a place where someone has testified, "What is mankind that you are mindful of them? A son of man that you care for him? You made them a little lower than the angels. You crown them with glory and honor and put everything under their feet." But we do see Jesus goes on and says that who was made lower than the angels for a little while. He was created, made lower than the angels. And when did that happen? That's when he gave up. He emptied, he kanaod his morphe theou and took on the form of a servant, a human being. There's no hypostatic union, my man. You've been lied to, and you're perpetuating that lie. And it's time to stop. Nothing left to be said, bud.